Hey everybody, Dr. G here. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and body language expert, and today we're going to be analyzing more footage of Bryan Kohberger. About a month before the murders took place, Bryan Kohberger was pulled over for a traffic violation. We have that body cam footage here, and we're going to watch it and see what it tells us about him. I want to remind you that he has not been found guilty, he has not had a trial yet, but he is a suspect, and he's going to be tried probably in July of this year. Now, if you saw my last video, you'll know that I talked about Recovery Addict, which is a channel right here on YouTube where you can watch live streaming trials. This is not an ad. I haven't been asked to do this, but I frequent this channel often, and I wanted to make sure that you know about it too. Recovery Addict covers trials as they are going on. There's really an amazing community behind Recovery Addict. You get a chance to interact with people if you go watch those trials live. You can talk to a lot of really interesting, really cool people that also watch a lot of my videos. So if you're looking for a place to watch live trials, please check out Recovery Addict. It's really one of my favorite channels right here on YouTube, so you got to check them out. Last thing before we get started, I just wanted to remind you to like and subscribe if you want to see more content just like this. All right, let's get started. So this body cam footage is from a police officer that pulled him over for a minor traffic violation. It's about a month before the murders occurred, and it's going to give us some insight into how he interacts with authority. And why that matters is because this clues us into how he's going to be if he provides testimony and has to interact with a prosecutor.
Hello, I am Officer Loangus.
The first thing we notice right off the bat is he is immediately aware that he is being recorded. He's going to be told he's being recorded regardless, but he's keenly aware that there's a camera right in his face. Now, many people may react the same way, but there's some interesting things about this that we're going to get into in a little bit, so just keep this in mind.
Stops being audio and video recorded. I think you know why I stopped you. You ran the red light.
What actually happened was I was stuck in the middle of the intersection.
Yeah,
so
I was behind you the whole
left.
time. Yeah.
Yeah.
So technically you're not supposed to enter the intersection.
All right, so mild defensiveness about why he got pulled over. This is pretty typical of when most people get a ticket, so nothing too exceptional yet.
At all for that reason, because if the light turns red, then you're stuck in the intersection, and then you run the red light. So that's the reason I stopped you. Do you have your license on you?
Yep. So would you explain that to me a little bit further? So in Pennsylvania, when you're stuck like in the intersection, you have to make the left. So.
All right, so what we're seeing now is he's being a little bit challenging. Not the end of the world. Plenty of people are challenging, and some people are even hostile when they're getting pulled over. But it's interesting. He planted the seed. In Pennsylvania, we do this. So he's letting the police officer know this is not a situation I'm familiar with, and he's already sort of building excuses for why it happened.
What would the appropriate thing for me to have done been? Just
You're not supposed to block an intersection like that in Washington, so just by you blocking the intersection, that's technically a ticketable violation, and then you're running a red light, so it's another ticketable offense. So you're not supposed to proceed into the intersection until you can go, because a lot of people do what you just did, right? Is like you're sitting in the intersection waiting, and then turns, and then you're blocking, so.
Yeah, there was a little bit of confusion with speeding because someone had stopped. I wasn't sure.
So he's doing this in a way that's coming across as polite and compliant, but he is challenging the police officer, which is interesting.
Sure what they were doing, and then they put on their light to turn. So I thought that maybe they were letting me go through.
One thing you'll probably notice is that he does stay remarkably flat during this. Very similar to the other footage that we saw of him, but he doesn't show a lot of emotional expression. We're going to go back, and I'm just going to play like the last 10 or 15 seconds so you can see that again.
Because someone had stopped. I wasn't sure what they were doing, and then they put on their light to turn. So I thought that maybe they were letting me go through.
Oh.
Did you see that?
No.
Yeah, like right before.
Now, if you look closely here, when he said that they were letting me go through, he squints a little bit. Now, one thing that this can mean, not saying it necessarily means this for him, but when we think about things that we don't like, or when we're frustrated by something, we squint. If you watch this,
I thought that maybe they were letting me go through.
It's just a little bit of a squint. Once again, don't want you to overinterpret it, but it's just sort of giving us an idea of how he feels about these things, potentially.
Oh.
Did you see that?
No.
Yeah, like right before.
Now, asking the police officer, did you see that, to me is actually a very challenging sort of stance to take. Once again, he says it in a respectful tone. He says it in a way that is not coming across as hostile.
Yeah, so I would just advise just don't enter the intersection until you can go, so you don't get stuck. Let's see.
But in that situation, the best thing to do then would be back up. And not.
I don't know if there's a best thing to do in that situation, because you're either going to back up into somebody,
Yeah.
or you're going to run a red light. So or you're going to be sitting in an intersection.
Yeah.
There's not really a great option there.
Yeah, I was just slightly into the crosswalks, so...
One thing that we're seeing is that he is clearly very bright. He's very analytical, and he's analyzing this situation as it unfolds. He's trying to provide details that will make him sympathetic, as many people would do when they've been pulled over, because it sounds like he probably doesn't want a ticket, but he's providing excessive information rather than just accepting, okay, fine, give me the ticket, let's get on with this. He continues to try to excuse why it happened and try to explain why it happened.
Yeah, where I'm from Pennsylvania, we actually don't have like crosswalks.
Oh,
so even if you're kind of slightly, there's a little bit more leeway as well. Like there.
Now, something that gives us a bit of insight into how he functions is that he is using intellect and information rather than charisma to try to get out of this ticket. He's not trying to be easy to get along with or like laugh or like try to get along with the police officer. He's continuing to try to provide information and data so that the police officer will choose to not give him a ticket, I presume.
There are a few lines, like there's one white line and there's another one in front. Like there's like a certain margin from which you can actually kind of put your vehicle, place your vehicle.
Yeah. So I know laws very.
Now at this point, he just remembered the cameras were on, I'm guessing. I mean, he hadn't looked at them the whole time, and now he's looking at it. And you're going to see a little bit of a behavior change.
Very state to state, but there is a law
Looked at it again.
in Washington for blocking an intersection like that, proceeding through when you don't, when you're just stalling. I forget the actual verbiage. I can find it for you, but it's like stalling, blocking an intersection.
Yeah, I'm just curious about the law. I don't mean to.
Oh no, yeah, I can find it for you. Yeah.
And then he looked at the camera again. He looks at it 3 times. Now, could just be that he's very aware that the body camera is on, but it also shows that he is thinking about the fact that he's being recorded, that he's considering that in the way that he's talking. Once again, I know this was a month before the murders took place. Once again, he has not been found guilty of that. I'm not saying that he did it, but I am saying that he seems to have a very keen awareness of the things going on around him, that he is very analytical. And for people, and I've had comments about this from my last video, that doesn't mean that somebody doesn't commit crimes and make mistakes. It's always possible that he did. Just because he's very aware of it now does not mean that he couldn't have made any mistakes should he have committed that crime.
1 second. That looks good.
I'm going to skip the next minute because it's just the police officer and her car, so there's no point in watching that.
Okay, so I found it. So I don't know what in Pennsylvania.
So challenging the law, even though he did it in a very respectful way, is actually a pretty bold move. Asking and insisting on seeing the law, that doesn't mean that he shouldn't have done it. I just think that it's interesting and tells us a bit about what he's like.
Where you go to find laws, but in Washington it's called the Revised Code of Washington.
So his method for getting out of this ticket actually worked. He challenged the police officer, wanted more information, talked about information about himself, and that made him get out of it. I think we're going to see something very similar when he's on trial. Presuming that he pleads not guilty, I think this is the exact approach that we're going to see from him again, which is that he is going to be very analytical, very flat, try to appear very calm. The question is whether or not he felt entirely calm. We're going to get into that in just a second. Let's keep watching.
You get stopped for that alone, unless you can clearly just clear it right away.
Okay.
So
then basically, I understand.
You're just supposed to wait behind the white line. Drivers do it all the time, but
it never even occurred to me that was actually something wrong. But well, except for the fact that I was blocking the crosswalk.
What's interesting also is that oftentimes when people feel relief, you can see it. They take a deep breath, they smile, they then try to connect with a police officer when they get out of a ticket, something like that, right? But he still has maintained the same sort of flatness and the same type of affect, which is interesting.
Which is
yeah, and states vary a lot from laws. Like Pennsylvania might not even have that law, but in Washington we do.
I'm actually just from a very rural area, so we just don't have crosswalks.
Oh.
Unless I visit an area where there are
Gotcha.
crosswalks.
And if you listen to the way that he speaks, he has a lot of precision with the things that he says. Once again, he focuses on information, not connecting. He doesn't seem to focus on the emotional connection. He focused on the connection of, I'm not from this area, so I want you to feel bad for me about that and not give me a ticket. But he doesn't try to connect using facial expressions or trying to be friendly or anything like that.
It's not very frequent.
Yeah.
I do apologize if I was asking you too many questions about the law. I wasn't trying to
No, not at all. Like I understand you're not from here, so if you don't, a lot of people don't.
and this is very subtle, and maybe it doesn't mean much, but I just think it's interesting and I want to point it out, is that after he'd asked all the questions, realized he was being recorded, he kind of backed off a little bit, and now, when he's talking about and apologizing for asking so many questions, he glanced down and looked at the camera again. So that suggests that his brain connects the two. The fact that he was talking about and asking questions and being a little bit difficult, but in a polite way, and that he's being recorded. Does that mean a whole lot? Not necessarily, but it does mean that he connects the two.
I do apologize if I was asking you too many questions about the law. I wasn't trying to,
No, not at all. Like, I understand you're not from here, so, if you don't, a lot of people...
So that may speak to two different things. One is that he associates having asked a lot of questions with the fact that he was being recorded. Something about that he probably doesn't love. The second part of that is that I wonder if internally he was experiencing a lot more frustration or anger or hostility than he showed.
People don't know a bunch of laws. Like, I only know it because this is what I do, but, yeah. If you're ever curious on any more laws, just RCW, and they can be hard to read because it's in, like, legal language, but, hope that helps.
So what does this tell us about Bryan Kohberger? I think it tells us a lot about how he's going to be once he takes the stand. I believe that he will testify. I really do. And I think that when he does, he's going to be very analytical. He's not going to be trying to schmooze the jury. It's not going to be tons of smiles. It's not going to be using charisma. He's going to be very analytical. And from what I can tell, he seems very bright. But I think what you see right here is exactly what you're going to get. And before we wrap up, I do want to remind you to check out Recovery Addict. They're not a sponsor or anything. I just happen to really like the channel, and I highly recommend you check them out if you want to watch any live streaming trials and interact with people, because the community there is awesome. Please don't forget to like and subscribe there, and also to like and subscribe here if you want to see more content just like this. All right, thanks for watching.